Just down the hallway from electronic assembly manufacturing is the carpentry shop, where all the woodworking is done. To keep the air as pure as possible, we have exhaust from all of these machines that goes outside of the building to keep sawdust at an absolute minimum. In this portion of the factory, rough sawn wood, like this piece of oak I'm holding, comes in this door, and by the time it moves through this portion of the factory, it's planed and shaped by the machines that are in back of me, and then it's moved to the CNC, computer numerically controlled routers, that I'll show you shortly, where it's actually turned into the parts that are necessary to build consoles. So this raw wood, by the time we're finished with it, is going to turn into a piece of an Allen organ console. Let's see how that works. Sanding is an important part of the process of woodworking here in the factory. If you're like me, when you think about sanding, you probably envision a piece of paper wrapped around a block of wood that you move back and forth by hand. But even in the old days, that's not the way we did it here. Let me show you a machine that we don't use anymore, but that used to be the prime sanding machine. This machine has a belt of abrasive material that moves across the workpiece, and the workpiece, the piece that's being sanded, is positioned on a table. That table moves back and forth, and the operator uses this block to exert pressure on the piece so that the sanding is done in this direction and also this direction at the same time. Now, the amount of pressure to apply and the speed with which you move the table is all up to the operator, and the men who use these machines were skilled technicians who developed their skill over years of experience. Today we do it quite a different way. Let me show you a machine that automates the process. This sander is one that we bought from a company in Italy, and it automates the process of sanding. Inside this machine, you see belts of abrasive material that are traveling in the same direction as the work material underneath them, and in the door next, which I'll open, you see another band of abrasive material that moves in contrary motion to the workflow. So we'll put a piece of wood in this end of the sander, and as it comes through, this abrasive belt works on it first, then this one, then the third one. And each successive abrasion is gentler. So the abrasive quality of this last belt is very, very fine. And this last belt is attached to an adjustable roller that can, by an eye inside, calibrate how much material it takes off the workpiece and in which portion of the material, or in which portion of the piece, the material is taken off. So if there's a high spot just here, we can remove just that bit of material and make sure that at the end of the process, the surface of the workpiece is entirely smooth and entirely level. A lot of people don't realize it, but sanding is the first step toward producing a wonderful finish on any piece of furniture. Unless the work is sanded perfectly, it shows up as an imperfection once the finish is applied. This computer screen allows the operator to tell the machine which piece of work is being worked on, and every different workpiece has a different program. So the program tells the sander how fast to move the work, how fast to spin the abrasive material, and the combination produces a perfect result. What you're seeing now is one of our CNC routers in action. This machine has a variety of different cutting tools and drills that can be presented to the workpiece. It's controlled by a computer station to the right of the cutting table, and that computer station has a program built into it for each different type of workpiece. What you'll see is that the cutting heads lift up above the workpiece, and then when the right cutting head is in place, it goes back down to the workpiece. The cutting head is actually surrounded by a brush that keeps dust and dirt out of the cutting area, so you can't actually see the head spinning, but what you'll see above it are exchangers that work kind of like a typewriter that alternate and exchange the various cutting heads while the piece is being dimensioned. The table moves, the cutting heads move, so it's a triple axis or XYZ operation. It can change depth and vertical or horizontal action. Every component that's produced using the CNC router requires a fixture to hold it in place while the router heads and the drills are working on it. What you see here is an indication of all the various different assemblies we create in this part of the factory. Each one of these fixtures is used for one or more different assemblies. This part that I'm holding will eventually be used as a draw knob jamb in an organ. And by using the CNC routers, we assure the best and most repeatable way of making parts precisely and quickly and to exact dimensions. After the individual parts have been cut, milled, and shaped, they're brought to this part of our factory called the console assembly area. They're inventoried on these racks, and then eventually they're brought to this portion of the facility where they're turned into pedal boards and consoles. As you'll see, the assembly of a pedal board is done by hand, as is the assembly of our consoles. All of the assembly is done using glue and dowels, as in fine furniture. So our woodworking is a combination of old school and new school. Here we see an Allen console starting to take shape. The draw knob jambs that you saw being cut on the CNC router just a minute ago have been partially assembled. They are going to fit into the console on these planes on either side, and eventually the draw knobs will be inserted to them later in the process. You'll see that. I wanted to show you some details about the console quality. If you look at the cross section of the console sides, you'll see that we use hardwood butcher block construction. This is the best, most stable kind of construction that can be used in any furniture. It's much better than plywood or even one solid piece of wood. This resists checking and warping and cupping and all the things that can disfigure or distort a piece of woodworking. On the outside, you see the thickness of the real walnut, in this case, veneer and outside layers that we use. And all of the products being used here are real hardwoods or hardwood veneers. There's no other kind of laminate or engineered wood product. This is all poplar core, and in this case, walnut on the outside. We also use oak as a second wood species that we work in. What you see here is Eric positioning the key beds in the console shell, and next he'll measure them to make sure the placement is accurate, and finally he'll attach them to the console. The aluminum parts that you see are the actual keyboard beds on which the individual keys of the keyboard will be positioned. We'll see in a little while how the individual keys are produced. One of the things that Alan does to make sure the keyboard beds are as sturdy and as stable as possible is that we construct them out of aluminum instead of out of just wood or plastic.
Clamp them, Eric? You can see from here. The rest of the parts will be fit around those. And we can end it there.
After the keyboards have been positioned accurately, the draw knob jambs are positioned around the keyboards. The keyboard positioning is the centerpiece of the console interior.